All right, guys, we got a special one today. Here with my co-host Shane Doyle, as always, steering the ship. And we have Davey Coombs. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for having me. I'm a long-time listener, all four.
Thank you. You've been around me a long time.
Oh, yeah. I still remember one of our first conversations, and I'm sure you don't remember this, but I had gone to Pro Circuit right before the Anaheim Supercross, and I was supposed to meet my friend Adam Wheeler there.
Oh, okay.
And he's a journalist from England and living in Barcelona now. Real good guy. He does MXGP stuff and works with Dorna. But anyway, I saw one of the people in there and like, hey, what are you doing here? I'm like, oh, I'm looking for Adam. And they're like, oh, he's in the back.
He's in the parking lot.
Yeah. And I go walking out there, I'm looking around and I see this motorhome and I'm okay. And I go knock on the door and you open the door and you're playing video games. And I'm like, oh.
Sounds like me.
Wrong Adam. You were like, hey, Davey, you want to come in and play video games?
No way.
You were like 12. And
oh, man, that was a good time.
Yeah, it was hilarious. And I remember walking away thinking, that's really cool. That kid's going to be really good. But, man, I'm glad my kids don't race.
Right? Yeah, I'm in a motorhome in the back of a parking lot like 4 months out of the year.
But you were at the epicenter of the motocross world. The Pro Circuit parking lot is not exactly Chicken Licks, out back or, Bithlo.
Yeah, no, that was so I got sponsored by Pro Circuit when I was 12, so 2009. Mm-hmm. And I remember my dad got to know Mitch pretty well and all the guys in the service department. And then I don't know how it ended up happening, but one day Pops was just like, we're going to California. Mm-hmm. And then we ended up staying, it had to be a 2-year period there. We eventually rented a house, but a 2-year period there where we would stay like 4 or 5 months out of the year in between Pro Circuit and then what we call Building C behind there. And, man, I learned so much about the industry and dirt bikes just being in those bench racing circles after 6 o'clock at Pro Circuit, man. It's good times.
But you've been around the color green so much that sometimes I wonder, like, what it would be like just, for bench racing's sake. What if you were, in red or orange or, I can't even imagine. I've only seen you on a Cobra.
That is true.
Yeah, that's it. That's all I've ever ridden. I mean, I got sponsored by Kawasaki in 2004. Yeah, 7 years old. So yeah, here we are.
Yeah,
long time.
I do remember you not to be interviewing you. I do remember a time, and you probably don't realize this, but you were incredibly instrumental in KTM putting a giant push into amateur and youth motocross in America. Because John Eric Burleson had brought Pitt Beyer to Loretta Lynn's and some of the other people from Austria, and they'd never been there. They'd heard about it and they wanted to see. And KTM North America wanted to make a push, and I took them out to the infield next to the start, and you drew number 42.
Oh man, I was always so bad at drawing spoons.
You're on the far outside, and I pointed you out. And Ian, I think, was in the back. So this is like 2011, maybe. Was that your last year on minis? 11 or 12?
12.
Okay, yeah. And I think you ended up on the cover of the magazine, so it probably was.
I think it was 11.
Yeah, and anyway, your last pick, you're on the far outside, and Ian's like, "What's he gonna do?" And I'm like, oh, that's Adam Cincerelli. He's going to get the whole shot and walk. And he's like, no way. And I'm like, watch, just watch. And you went through every single technique perfectly. Gears, the way you went off the gate, got out on the grass.
I had a fast motorcycle.
You had a fast motorcycle, but you also had to be fearless on the outside of that first turn. Well, then the next moto, I think you drew a 39.
Yeah.
And we're back out there, and they're like, what's he going to do? I'm like, he's going to take the outside gate. He's going to get the whole shot. I think you led every inch that year. And I remember them being like, we've got our work cut out. We've got a lot of work to do. And they've done it.
I created a monster.
You created an orange monster for sure.
Yeah, I remember I did draw close to 40 both times, but that specific time I started all the way on the outside, I remember drawing like 30 or 31. But I went all the way to the outside just for just to try to, as the entertainer in me, I wanted to try to pull the whole shot from the outside. And I was always just trying to impress guys like you and really anybody in the infield. That was like my time to shine. So, but here we are, Friday before Southwick, almost halfway through the season already. Man, it goes fast.
Yeah, the halfway point will be tomorrow, mid-moto. Because it's 11 nationals this year. Because thank goodness there's not 2 Fox Raceways.
Yeah,
that was a filler last year. We thought we were going somewhere else, but it didn't work out.
What year is this for you?
For doing
pro motocross, like being at the races?
Oh, well, I grew up at the races. My parents had their first national May 5th, 1974, at Appalachia Lake. I think I was too young to flag, so I got to work the pit gate and pick up garbage afterwards. But I just love it. I've been around it forever. I remember my first time at Southwick was 1993, and that was the first time I did TV.
Okay.
A guy.
We'll get into that too. Okay. I want to get into that. But.
Okay. But as far as pro motocross, my family's been doing it forever. And when the AMA put AMA Pro Racing up for sale in 2007, 2008, we bid on it, meaning MX Sports. So did the NPG, but that was John Ayers, and we both lost. DMG, which is Jim France's company, bought it, the whole thing, and then they turned around and said, hey, do you want to run motocross? Well, you want to lease it from us? So we've been in charge since 2009.
Okay.
But my dad had started the NPG in 1997, and he did that because, you probably weren't even born yet.
96.
Okay, well, in 95, after, the night the lights went out in Las Vegas, Gary Becker and Charlie Mancuso decided to consolidate Supercross and buy the other promoters out, like Bill West,
right,
and the Mickey Thompson group. And we thought that they were going to come after pro motocross next. And at that time, pro motocross was really loosely organized. It was just a series, but everyone had their own sponsors. Everyone had their own sort of way of doing it. My dad's like, look,
each event,
right. Yeah. And it made it, every now and then they get a title sponsor like Wrangler or Skull Bandits.
Rad.
Wow. If the AMA would do that. And so Dad had gotten the other promoters together and said, we got to circle the wagons. If we don't get professional, if we don't get serious, Supercross it's going to be 25 races before we know it.
Right.
And that's where he kind of drew the line in the sand. And that was the beginning where I think he became sort of the leader, but then unfortunately died the next year. And so it kind of dropped into my mom and sister and myself's laps. And we ran it for 10 years through the NPG. Not ran it. Each promoter is their own promoter. The Ritchie family owns Redbud, Lock, Stock, and Barrel.
Got it.
We bring the series there, and that includes the television, the title sponsor, the teams, the infrastructure, the everything. But at the end of the day, the Redbud promoter is Tim and Amy Ritchie.
Right. So
actually, Amy and Tim Ritchie, she hates getting second billing.
What about track prep? Does each individual promoter, are they completely in charge of how the track is prepped, or do you have like some guidelines?
We have some guidelines, and we've developed a lot of rapport with everyone. Now, there was a time like when John Ayers really was sort of the de facto manager of the tracks, and he would work with, and he was really good. He's a former pro, and
right.
He'd just been around it forever, and he would work with the track owner, with whoever the track builder was, to get it just right. But we did have a different philosophy. He believed that it was better to make it really muddy in the morning, really muddy, and then because you didn't have a lot of time during the day, and hit that perfect spot like midway through the motos. And a couple years ago, and I'm sure you remember this because you were part of that amazing High Point battle with Eli and whoever, maybe Dylan. We did the track differently because John had gotten hurt in a mountain bike crash and wasn't there. So, and this is a couple years ago, and we just simply said, hey, let's back up a little bit. Let's water if we have to. Let's try to not make it
2021. I think.
Yeah. Let's not make it so deep as we have. His philosophy worked great for television, but some of the riders understandably did not like it. There were long, deep ruts, and
Right.
so we kind of got away from that.
You're always going to make somebody.
Yeah.
Please everyone.
But now, each track has their own sort of track architect, track builder, and we more or less leave it with them. We have some input, but they all know what we're looking for. We know what TV's looking for. We know what the riders want. And when we get it wrong, believe me, we do what we can to fix it. And, full responsibility for what happened at High Point a couple weeks ago. It wasn't supposed to rain, and it hadn't rained there for a month. And my brother-in-law, Jeff Russell, who was working with Randy Poulter on the track, they decided with this rain coming on Thursday night that they would dig it deep because it was dry as a bone. And it would have been perfect, but then it rained again. We had to cancel press day, then we had to cancel amateur day, and then we had to start pushing mud off.
Yeah, it was ruddy.
Yeah, and I reminded my brother-in-law, like, look, remember, my dad always said it's easier to put water on the track than it is to take it off. And we missed. We gambled a little bit. And we have all those water trucks and equipment and extra operators and stuff. I think we made a tactical mistake on the side of they were just betting that it was going to work out. No one saw that second rain coming. In this day and age, especially you see all the weather channels and all the apps and everything like that.
They never get it right.
Not in West Virginia, not in Pennsylvania. That time of the year, you never know. So anyway, to me, that's a long story, short answer. Each track does things differently. Southwick 100% does it their own way. I mean, no one can tell Keith Johnson, John Dowd, and Doug Henry, and Mike Treadwell,
or would they dare,
more how to do it better than the guys who spent their lives on that track, and they've been getting it right ever since we've been coming back. I really enjoy coming here because the feel here. Every track has its own sort of history and local community and vibe, but Southwick especially, it's
grassroots,
so unique.
The NESC's runs deep here, and I guarantee you that Jimmy Dakotas and Billy Ainsworth will have as many fans as Tom Vial and Joe Shimoda.
Yeah, Chris Canning.
Yeah,
he always ribs.
Yeah,
was Robbie Marshall maybe?
Yeah, Robbie Marshall. Yeah.
And back in the day, it was guys like Pat Botten. And it looks like Pat Barton when you see it in the vault, but he would say Pat Botten.
So that's one of my favorite. I love when I'm sitting around or traveling or whatever. I'm often on like Wikipedia. Like I'll see some documentary and then I'll go down a wormhole of. I'm just like a big history guy, right? And I'm always in the Racer X vault, just scrolling through there, guys I've never heard of. Seeing it's cool. You can get a lot of cool information in there.
That's my favorite part of still being a journalist is getting to do the old stuff. I'm in my 50s now, and it's weird. I don't really know. I mean, I've known you for a long time, but I don't know what to talk to Hayden Deegan about. Instagram. Should we talk about followings?
Yeah,
we talk about going viral, or is that still a thing?
Yeah, it becomes harder to relate.
Yeah, and I know Brian.
Even the same for me.
Yeah,
like even that generation below me, I struggle kind of relating.
Makes you feel old.
And so for me, it's like because I've been in it for so long. I've been a journalist since the mid '80s when I was still a pro. I was like, this professional racing career is not going to work out.
Yeah, so I guess my next question would be, you've kind of been all over the place in terms of jobs within the industry. We've seen you on TV doing the media thing. We see you with Racer X, obviously your role with Pro Motocross. I guess what is the kind of been the overview of your career?
Well, I honestly, I thought I was going to be a school teacher. Really? I like you. I love history. I mean, I'm reading a book about the Russian Revolution on the way up here. When I'm not trying to hurry up and get Racerhead done. Yeah. When they say put your computer away, out comes the Anthony Beaver book about the Russian Revolution. As soon as the light goes, the bell goes, back comes the computer. But anyway, I raced. I loved it. I was decent on a mini bike. I didn't take it quite as serious. And once I got to bigger bikes, I was also playing basketball. I was playing football in school. And I found that I loved going to the races. I loved the road trips, and seeing the country and
Me too.
everything. But I also really liked putting that down on paper. And because we had our own racetrack at the time, and my sister was on her way to law school, but she was a journalist. She took photos, wrote stories for Cycle News, because that's how you got yourself on the map.
Oh yeah,
back then.
Cycle News.
Both as a track promoter, a rider, and even as a journalist. You had to, everyone from Jody Weisel to Don Maeda to Ken Vaught to Kit Palmer, Chris Johnham, who now does all of Honda's media, Eric Johnson, who's been my longtime partner.
Yep.
We all came through Cycle News. And
crazy.
I was never actually in the building as a staffer, but I was a at-large contributor. I'd cover all the nationals and stuff like that. But
it's funny because I remember 2009 Ponca City. I got my first Cycle News cover, and as as somebody born in 1996, and in cycle, it was kind of more. I was trying to get on the Racer X cover and the Transworld cover. And not that I didn't appreciate it, but when the Cycle News, it's like I knew it was a huge deal, but I didn't really know the backstory and the legacy behind Cycle News.
Well, man, if you want to go down rabbit holes, the Cycle News Archive is the best $5.99 you'll ever spend, because you can go back and they have them all digitized.
Really?
I'll show you afterwards, like how to get there. I'm in the archives 2 or 3 times a week, and it's like if I want to figure out, like, okay, so Tom Vial, what number Frenchman will he be when he wins his first national? And then I'll start thinking, well, obviously it starts with JMB. What place did JMB get in '89 at Gatorback? And how did that all come about? And then I'll go back to Cycle News and look through it. And, and he had, Starbuster on the back of his pants and all that little minutia of motocross history. I just love that stuff.
Yeah.
But my sweet spot, though, was as I was coming up through, Carrie Jo went to law school, my older sister, and Dad was like, hey, here's a camera. It's your turn. You gotta help out.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to turn pro. I was doing my first job, which was picking up garbage after the races. And I was learning how to take photos and write stories. And the first article I got published was actually Cycling East, which was like a district newspaper.
Okay.
In District 7 in Maryland. And a guy named Stan and Dorothy Miles ran it. And when they printed it, I got a check for $32. And my dad was like, there you go.
No way.
Yeah.
That was probably big money though.
Yeah.
It was huge money.
Probably 500 today.
But he was like, if you do this, you could work your way through college. And I started doing that. And I started branching out and doing more stuff. And but my as far as racing pro goes, even by then I was like, you know what? College is a better idea for me. And I told the story before. In '80, I was racing with like Eddie Warren and Keith Bowen and those guys. '81, I was battling with Lachine and Donnie Schmidt. And in '82, I'm first year Loretta Lynn's. I'm back in about 9th or 10th in the A class. '83, Ron Lachine's winning Supercrosses and Nationals, and I'm still 9th or 10th at Loretta Lynn's in the A class. So I'm like, I'm going to focus on school. So I got to do just a couple Supercrosses, one national I qualified for. And then
you did Daytona Supercross, right?
I got 9th at Daytona in '85. That is my
That's awesome.
claim to fame. It was the first year of the 125 class. So it wasn't like now, believe me. But
who cares?
Yeah,
Hey,
It's on paper.
in the vault. In the
It's
vault
on paper.
Yeah, in the vault, it counts the same. But I studied English and history in college, and right when I was about to the point where I was going to start applying for law schools and stuff, my sister was like, you've got a good thing going. By now I'm writing for Dirt Rider. I was writing for Dirt Wheels, Dirt Bike, all these different things, and she's like, why don't you start a newspaper or start doing event programs or something? And so I did. I said, hey, Dad, can I do the High Point National program instead of this like rinky dink thing that we used to get from this company that did all the programs. And I made it like an editorial. I thought it was a masterpiece. It was probably just people like, yeah, $1 for this. Okay.
Do you have one still?
Oh yeah, yeah. That was the 86 High Point program. And then in 87, I did the Steel City GP, USGP program. And then by 88 and 89, I'm starting to do Bill West stuff and other promoters. And pretty soon I had a program business. Then I started a newspaper that was called, it was the District 5 newspaper. It was called the Racing Paper. And I started putting some of my pro stuff in it because I just found it more entertaining, especially because I couldn't go to local races because I was doing more and more pro races and people liked it. And then, pretty soon I came up with the idea to change the name to Racer X. And it wasn't because of the Speed Racer.
Turned out okay.
It wasn't the Speed Racer cartoon. It was because my parents' company was Racer Productions. And the X stood for like MX, SX, AX, GNCC. It was cross, But Racer Cross sounded like a religious thing.
Right.
So Racer X it became, and I just kept rolling with it. And then, in 1997, it became a magazine. And so I had that up and running, and I still do the day-to-day, every day. And we've been lucky enough to catch every wave, whether it was the internet or videos or social media or, all those.
Always stayed on top of it.
Always stay on top of it. And that in large parts because the people working with me, everyone brings something new with them. I kind of drew the line like, I'm not going to go anywhere past Facebook. Yeah, and then Brian
now Facebook owns everything.
I know, but Brian Steele's like, you got to try this other thing, Instagram. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not touching that Twitter thing. Now we have tweets every 16 seconds.
How many people are there at Racer X?
At all times, maybe 16 to 20. And also, it was always my dream to have a motorcycle magazine in Morgantown, West Virginia, because I live there and I love it. It's a cool college town and everything. But it wasn't everyone else's dream. And so we have a pretty open policy about where you can live. So Simon Cudby lives in Boise, Idaho. And Scott Wallenberg, our publisher, also lives in Idaho. David Langren, our main designer, lives in Laguna Beach. I guess he's art director. We have people like sort of all over the place because Morgantown's not for everyone. And also because of the way life works now with everyone's connected. It doesn't matter where you are, as long as you do the work.
I feel like after COVID, so many people stopped going to work and never really went back.
It's tough to have an in-office job, I feel like, or at least to get younger people.
For sure.
Unfortunately.
It's hard to get them to go back to school, trust me. But anyway, and then everything took kind of a detour in 1993, and that's why I started talking about my first Southwick. I came here for the first time because I was coming to do a story on Doug Henry for, remember Inside Motocross magazine, which was that masterpiece that Fran Kuhn did for Axo and Jim Hale. He hired me to write stories for it.
Axo was so cool.
It was, especially back then. Holy smokes. And anyway, I was supposed to do a story on Doug Henry. Well, I had earlier that year, remember Todd Hicks?
Yeah, of course.
Fox Racing?
Of course.
Okay, Todd and I decided to do a road trip. And he was like, I'm going to fly the Atlanta Supercross. And back then, Gatorback took place the following week. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll meet you in Atlanta. I'll drive down. I'll bring some bikes. I got to cover it. And then I got to cover this National Enduro the next day in Georgia. And then we'll go to Gatorback in Florida. He's like, okay, great, let's do it. Well, we went to this Enduro the next morning, and there was a gentleman there named Bob Link who worked for Moto World and the old Speed TV or whatever it was. And he would cover the races by himself, especially like a cross country or an Enduro. Right. He had a camera and he had a microphone. And he would film the race, and then afterwards he'd hold the camera, this giant thing, and hold the microphone and interview people. And I'm trying to do the Cycle News thing with my tape recorder. And I'm like, hey, Bob, let me help you out here. And I just grab the microphone, and I'm just asking my questions. And it's guys like Kevin Hines and Randy Hawkins and my brother-in-law, Jeff Russell, guys that I had a real rapport with because, when I couldn't get in for motocross and supercross, I started doing off-road and built my name up through doing that. So anyway, afterward, we're done. Handed Bob the microphone.
Did you like that?
Oh, because I didn't even think about it.
Really?
It was just asking questions because we were trying to get out of there to get down to Gainesville.
So very organically.
Yeah. We were going to MacGyver's house or something, and we just wanted to get down to Florida. So anyway, I never thought another thing about it until the week of Southwick, and I think it was Southwick was running May back then, but. I get a call from this guy named Dennis Torres, and he's like, hey, I saw your tape. I saw your reel, and we're in a jam, and we really need a pit reporter for the Southwick National this weekend. And I'm like, I don't have a reel. I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, no, Bob Link gave me your tape from that National Enduro in Georgia, and I think all you got to do is just ask questions after the race. And I was like, I don't know if I'm cut out for that. He goes, we'll give you $500. I'm like, there.
Yep.
Because that was more than I was going to make doing everything else. And then they're like, oh, and we'll get you a plane ticket and a hotel room. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, I like this. I want to do this. And all of a sudden, just by working and being around it, all of a sudden I was doing all the ESPN stuff and enjoyed the heck out of it. And then I had a family. And my son Vance was born in 2002, and Racer X was blowing up. And by 2004, and 2005, I remember Vance, who's like 2 or 3 at the time, he would hide my book bag in the house if he knew I was going to leave. And it became I'm going to miss my flight, and I can't be dealing with this. And then it kind of dawned on me. I'm like, wait a minute, something's got to give.
Yeah.
Because I really, we're all built and meant to be dads. And the other stuff, is just you find something you love,
extra,
something you're good at,
just distracting ourselves. Yeah,
really. But then you got to remember that your kids are here to replace you, so don't get too close.
Absolutely, no, you're right. What have you found to be? I guess, and we'll get to kind of bridging over to now, but you're kind of just a Swiss Army knife of motocross. What's your biggest passion, I guess? What have you been most passionate about in your career?
I think writing. I really like to write a good, long story about something that no one really knows or understands. And I'd mentioned Ron Lachine earlier. Dogger had some issues. Dogger, admittedly wasted a lot of, he had talent to burn. So he went out and burned it. And, or as the other joke of the day was, he left no turn unstoned.
I like that one.
Anyway, love Ronnie.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
He was incredibly important for the initial success of Loretta Lynn's because him and his father came from California when no one else really thought that it was going to work or was worthwhile. And him being there sort of legitimized it. And he'd come the year before when the Nationals were in North Carolina. But anyway, Ronnie had gone, in the big house for a little while. And when we started the magazine, it was sort of a dream story of mine to do a story with Ron Lachine. And I called him up, and he said, "Yeah, come out to El Cajon, and we'll go have dinner, and I'll tell you everything." And man, I was not ready for everything.
Really,
it was an amazing story, and we called it "What the Hell Happened to Ron Lachine." And you just didn't put titles like that in motocross magazines.
It's cool that he was open about it like that.
He was, because he was over it. He
sometimes you got to get it all out to leave it behind.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it was part of his recovery. And he was back working at Maxima, back riding, and just was rebuilding his life. And to me, like writing that story and having that sort of in my as part of my experience and part of my contribution, not only to Ronnie, but just to all the people in that era that watched that and just like, what the hell's happening?
So you have a responsibility to tell that story.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes those stories are impossible to tell, and guys don't want to talk about it. I remember when Damon Bradshaw just kind of lost his mind a little bit after the meltdown at 92 LA Coliseum. He raced the next year. You know, he took time off after that. Then he raced the next year, and he just wasn't the same. And you know, I mean, he was barely in his 20s, and he just stepped away from motocross and disappeared for a year and a half. And then one day he called me, and he's like, "Hey, you wanna do a story?" You know, and you know, because I feel like, you know, and I'm like, yeah,
absolutely.
You know, so I did it for Cycle News and for my little newspaper back in West Virginia, and that was big. And I was like, I want to do this. This is what I like to do. I love to bench race, but I like the history of motocross more than anything. You know, I like, you know, the Russians in the 70s. You know, what was that like with the?
Remember EJ did a write up.
Oh
on
yeah,
that, didn't he?
Yeah. And sometimes you got to share the good stuff,
of course.
You know, and Eric, who's a phenomenal writer, and you've been lucky enough to do some stuff with him. I've been his editor from day one, and man, he's got a soft spot for Johnny O'Mara.
Oh yeah,
Russians, and just like
Formula One,
old USGPs. Oh, the F1 thing. I think his only regret is that we became best friends, and I wasn't the F1 guy.
Yeah.
I was the Supercross guy.
Right.
But yeah, and so and it's funny, Adam. That's the other thing. I really wanted to be a school teacher. My mom and dad were school teachers. They stumbled onto moto after my dad saw the movie On Any Sunday. Before that, he really was a jack of all trades. He had a little coal mine. When I say little, I mean as big as this fancy hotel room that you guys have rented for a studio here in uptown Boston or wherever.
We're still a low budget production.
But anyway, my parents, you know, they were able to buy my brother and I mini bikes by working as school teachers during the winter, and then they ran their racetracks that they were getting started in the summer, and they were adamant about school. We had to have straight A's. We had to, and it wasn't like homeschool was an option. We didn't even know what that meant, nor would that have ever been a thing.
I knew what it meant.
Yeah, that came along later. But anyway, so I was going to be an English and history teacher and ended up studying that in college. And to this day, I tell people when I retire, when this is all over, when they say, give us it all back, I will go teach school and hopefully high school history. And I'll be that teacher that says, let me tell you what really happened in World War I.
Right.
Or, you know,
oh man,
history.
We could sit here and talk for an hour about World War I.
Yeah. Your history classes always sort of stop right when you get to Vietnam. Why? Because it's a really complicated topic.
Yeah, it really
or the
is.
civil rights movement or any of that stuff. And my sweet spot, and this is how I got through college, getting 2 degrees, is I would do my paper on something on World War I, as far as history goes, the Battle of the Somme. And then for English, I would do my paper on the Lost Generation writers and how they covered World War I. And I'm reading the same things. And it was like, it was a way to sort of, and I think that's part of what taught me how to do 2 things or 3 things at once, by sort of, I go to these races. I am helping in the promotion and organization. I know about TV because I did it for 10, 12 years until it was time to focus on other things. And I know, what the riders might be thinking, at least at a base level.
Yeah. Made you well-rounded.
Yeah. And so my job, I think, has become to put all those things into use and helping, move this rock up this hill or spin this carousel that we're all on around. I mean, I know that, you're a student of it. You've been around it. You're a businessman. You're an entrepreneur with what you and Shane are doing. But you're going to be able to put all that stuff to the next thing that comes, no matter what that is.
And there's always the next thing.
There's got to be a next thing. Even Tom Brady's looking for the next thing.
100%. Probably harder than ever.
I don't think he's going to be able to see it from behind Kim Kardashian, but he's looking.
Oh, is that where he's at right now?
That's where he's at. He got caught last week.
No way.
Yeah. How on topic am I? See, I guess I could talk to Hayden Deegan.
You're trendy.
I know what's going on TMZ.
Man, I don't even know that.
Yeah,
so you
he's
got me
trendy.
covered.
The reason I was on TMZ, though, by the way, Shane, you'll appreciate this. So we all know Britney Spears
I saw this.
from Jamie Spears coming to Loretta Lynn's and being a big fan. And
I had dinner with Mitch and Jamie Lynn and Brittany's dad one time. I was random. Yeah.
And I remember Trampus Parker used to call me before Loretta Lynn's all the time in the 90s. You know, he's living in Europe. He's multi-time world champion, but he'd call and say, hey, my buddy Jamie Spears is coming. You know, he's Britney Spears' dad. And I'm like, okay, you know, and I didn't believe him, and I'm like, okay, I'll get him a pass, you know, or whatever he wants, you know, because he wasn't racing, and as you know, no one can get into the race, you got to qualify. But anyway, never met the guy, never ran the guy, and one day I'm at Anaheim, and this is about 2004 or 2005, and Pete Fox comes to the non-hole club and he goes, hey, I want to introduce you to my buddy. This is Jamie Spears. I mean, you exist? Yeah. Like you're actually a real person. He goes, yeah, I seen you at Loretta Lynn's all the time. I'm like, you're not wearing a suit. You had a suit on. You just come from like Beverly Hills, or something. But anyway,
that's turned out to be a wild story.
And we could go,
that's a whole nother
go. And I actually went to Europe with Jamie and some things. So we've become very good friends.
Oh, okay, awesome. I didn't know that.
But I do, you know, I had a front row seat to the whole Britney nonsense, we'll call it. Which is really unfortunate how something can get out of control and people who don't know, absolute strangers, get involved and make everyone's life a living hell.
The day we live in now is you see a headline and then that immediately in your head, that's the narrative of whatever that situation is. Well, it's unfortunate. And
I agree. And so every week in Racerhead, we kind of have a contest like who can find the best head scratching.
Oh yeah,
headline. And the headline that pops up, and it's Mitch Kendra who's in charge of RacerX Online, is Britney Spears smacked in face by Victor Wembanyama's bodyguard. Yeah. And I had just watched the NBA draft, and I've been watching this kid for years, you know, because I'm a big fan of international basketball too, and especially Tony Kukoc came along. That was my guy.
No way.
Anyway, then the headline changes to Britney Spears yelled, I'm an effing American at Victor Wembanyama after the collision or whatever.
No way.
And I'm like, well, this is even better. And then right at the end, right when I'm getting ready to hit send on Racerhead, it pops up and it says, Britney Spears accidentally hit herself in the head during Victor Wembanyama exchange. And I'm like, oh, this is too good to be true. And I'm like, yeah. And then below that, it says Tom Brady's with Kim Kardashian.
Is that real?
He was at that party with I don't know.
Oh yeah,
the white party.
Everybody was there. Everybody's wearing all white.
The white party.
God, Michael Rubin.
Yeah,
Michael Rubin. Okay,
it was his party. They were spotted together.
It's kind of a weird topic to bridge to, given that conversation. But you got me thinking, talking about your experience with school. Mm-hmm. I'm always wondering from your perspective, and I think on this a lot. Just with the commitment you have to make in racing and how it's not integrated into any type of school system, obviously, in these week-long races make it tough for me. Even me growing up in school, I excelled in school. I liked school. I've always liked learning, but, you know, I was going to, at 7, 8 years old, I'm going to Lake Whitney in Mosher Valley for 2 weeks, and then going to, you know, Loretta's regionals and World Mini and Loretta's, all these kind of things that were kind of getting away. I had to get homeschooled. What is your opinion? What is your opinion on all of that? And what do you think from your perspective, from your knowledgeable perspective, like what would you feel is kind of best? Like what would you, I guess, recommend?
Well, first of all, not a difficult segue, but a very important topic, which I have an evolving opinion of.
Yeah.
And
like many things, which a lot of people are scared to admit that our opinions evolve, but we got to let new information in so we can continue to grow.
Well, I was from the generation where we thought of people who homeschooled as home practice. like that it wasn't really legit.
And that, I received a lot of that as well.
And I had a platform to say I believe that, and I've said it many times. I believed that motocross and supercross's dirty little secret was a lack of education in the top athletes.
Yes.
And then I started seeing it, trickle down as more and more people took that route. So, but let me put a button on it right there. Yeah. In 2005, I was doing a story on Ryan Villapoto, and he was just getting ready to turn pro. He had come out of almost nowhere, it seemed like, because we'd seen the Alessis for so long, and then all of a sudden, boom! Here's this kid.
Last year,
and so I talked to his father Dan and his mom Kristen, and we just started talking about it. And she was like, we made the difficult decision that we were going to have to homeschool him, and his little brother Tyler, and my daughter, Kylie. Yeah. And she was like, do you know how difficult that is? Because we're doing it for one child, but I can't leave the other two kids at home. I wish that there was a better system. I don't apologize for it. I do the best I can. Well, I didn't realize at the time that the Lieb family was kind of going through the same thing. Yeah. And Andrea started what is now known as On Track School. And her first students were her son, Michael, her daughter, Kylie Villapoto, and Ryan Villapoto. And she was very smart, because you mentioned all the races that you had to go to. And every kid has to go to a lot of these races. She realized, Andrea and the people that she was building this with, that the one thing that is always missing from most homeschools is a lack of community, a lack of a regular visit.
Yes.
And you're just gone. You're just off doing your thing. You don't know. And she was like, if we could figure out a way to get people together at the races and get moms that maybe are on the road that are accredited school teachers, to get other people. And then she started thinking, and I remember having the conversation, I doubt there's a classroom in Cairo, Georgia, at any of those facilities.
Right.
And she's like, she's like, you know what? We're going to get one. I think that's a great idea. And so I became a fan of Andrea's real go-get-itness and have watched it evolve. And then, my family, who, again, were adamant anti-homeschool, but we didn't have to make the choices that other families have to make or feel that they have to make. And no one can tell someone else how to raise their kid.
Of course.
And let alone their whole family.
Yes.
And I go back and forth with Mathis on this. We've gotten to the point where we really believe in what Andrea is doing within our sport, not just for the future guys that are going to be the Adam Cincerillas or the Hayden Degans of the world, but the ones that are going to need a job.
Yeah. And
for that, they're going to need an education. And a GED through a accredited good program is a hell of a lot better than nothing. And I can tell you, I think it's a lot better than some of the public school things I've seen. And also every sport deals with this.
Yes.
Nick Bollettieri's got his tennis academy. Yeah. There's a golf academy. And everywhere, and it's like, those.
Well, at the end of the day, it's the decision of the parent and the child. It has to be a point of emphasis. Period. Like, it doesn't matter what system you're in, homeschool, public school. If you're not committed to it, then it's only as good as your commitment to it.
Yeah, and I think I would have been good at it if I'd have been homeschooled because of my parents' background. But not every parent has that background.
And what I've found and what I've seen is it's really. And like we said, we're kidding ourselves if we think it's just dirt bikes. And, I'm going to talk about it as just dirt bikes, but it's every different sports landscape, I would imagine, especially as sports evolve. It seems like, kids, we talk about kids being in training facilities from a really young age and things like that. But it's so easy to get caught up in kind of the emotions and ego of it all, of like amateur racing, right? Where these races and, how well your kid's doing is so, which it is a big deal, but it just becomes this massive deal. Things like school get left by the wayside, and I think I'm grateful for my parents. They've always were My mom especially was always like, man, you really need to be educated because this might not work out.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest thing is if you don't have any type of backup plan, I mean, it's really hard to be Eli Tomac or Cooper Webb or James Stewart, so that's the issue.
It's hard to be Alex Ray. It's hard
really
to be, it's hard to be, Hardy Munoz and all those guys. I don't even know what either their backgrounds are, but I just know that they made every bit as much an effort and commitment as any, Cooper, James, Ricky, Ryan, either Ryans. So let me respond two ways. So to illustrate that it's not just motocross. So I have a daughter, Sloan. And she is a volleyball player. She's in Morgantown High School, public school back home. But when she was 5 and 6, her mother, now my ex, wanted her to be an actress. And Sloan, has charisma, just pretty little girl, incredibly smart, and decides to go for it. And all of a sudden, I am renting a place in California during what you would consider the Supercross season.
Okay.
Just, from after Christmas, we would move to California for what was called pilot season and stay in a little apartment. And I'd be going around to the races, drive to Phoenix, drive to San Francisco, drive to San Diego, go around the industry, visit advertisers. I was working. And they would wait for the phone to ring. And it was very frustrating. And then one day the phone rang, and all of a sudden she got a nice part. And then you build on that success, and all of a sudden they know, hey, this little girl showed up on time, knew her lines, was no problem. Another part comes, and then another part comes. And then pretty soon my daughter, and I don't talk about this very often, but
I've never heard this.
She becomes in the course of one winter. She's Vin Diesel's daughter in The Last Witch Hunter. She's Tuco's daughter in Cleveland Abductions, which was a Hallmark movie. And then the checks start rolling in. She was in CSI. She was in a couple commercials.
How much are we talking about? Like how much is a check for?
It would be. I would say the money a first year 250 guy gets, she made as a 8 or 9 year old.
Wow.
And then she quit.
Wow.
And then she just said, you know what? I want to go home. I want to, and it caused.
It takes a lot of
that's impressive.
Intelligence.
I could not be prouder of her in hindsight because she's like, I'm going to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And she was doing this when you were like on, 85s.
Yeah.
That was her mindset. Was okay. I tried that, and even though, I'm
doing pretty well, making some good money.
Yeah, and those checks still roll in. It's the funniest, strangest thing, and I can see where parents who have a successful kid in a sport when the money starts coming in, but for us it was just like this other strange thing, and she's gonna have a very nice first car. It's gonna be a Honda Civic if I buy it, but if she wants to buy it herself, have at.
Yeah. Does she look back now and regret it, or is she still content with it?
Not one bit. Wow. And she is thinking, though, when she's in college, that she might pick it up again. But she wanted to go home and live with her friends and live with her family and be in Morgantown, West Virginia.
Because it can kind of go that age. It can kind of go one way or the other. You can have this little piece of normal life, or you can decide to do this and not be normal at all.
So she decided to go back to school, regular school. I found out how difficult homeschooling can be. And it takes both parents to be fully vested in it. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, and this is something you probably don't know if you didn't read the rule book, because it doesn't actually relate to you. In 2020, we passed a new rule in AMA Pro Racing that you cannot race the 450 class in pro motocross unless you have a GED or are in a program to get a diploma or actually have a high school diploma. And we're sticking by it. I was wondering what Jet Lawrence was going to do when he decided to join the 450 class, but he turned pro in 2019. So he got grandfathered in, but he is working, I believe, with On Track and Andrea Lieb. But every rider moving forward, I'm sure people, I'm sure people would be like, well, why should we be able to do that, whatever. But man, for every Adam Cincerilla, there are 99 Mitch Cumsteins and maybe more. And it's the least we can do is use the structure we have, just like a high school or any other sport does, to say, you know what, if you want to play, you got to stay in school. And our thing is, okay, if you want to race, you got to stay in school. And we'll see how it goes. We've not had anyone not be able to race yet.
That would be a pretty public.
Yeah, but that's cool though that you're not letting someone that's a superstar just skip out on that.
Yeah, and so at High Point, Hayden Deegan, graduated. We put him on,
that was cool.
We put him on the podium, and we thought that was a cool thing because it was a strong message, and that's an influential kid. No way around it.
Sure, probably the most.
Yeah, certainly in his for current 17-year-old star Yamaha racing riders with sisters in NASCAR, he's probably it.
Yeah, probably the guy.
but I don't mean to make fun. I really respect what Brian and Marissa have done with all three of their kids.
They've been very smart about it all.
And very smart about it, but also very consistent. And you can listen to Hayden on the podium, and it's like listening to you.
Yeah, it's not by accident.
Yeah, he comes by it honestly, and they're all in, but with all facets of it.
I think it's easy to when you feel like the Deegans, you feel like they've built like an empire, right? Like their media presence is massive. I think it can be easy to say, like we talked about, you just go straight to a headline, like it's straight to a narrative. Like you could say that they're being pushed into it, like that's what kind of you would go into in your head automatically. But you can see from Haley Deegan, Hayden, that they love it themselves, and they're very competitive, and everybody's doing it for the right reasons, which is great to see. Yeah, he's really impressed me.
And they're very much a loving family. You can see that. I know that Brian, was more of a wild child.
Yeah.
With Moto Triple X days and ghost riding his bike and all that.
That was cool.
But and you'll find this really wildly coincidental. Brian's father was the head of the Board of Education in Nebraska. Brian grew up.
Really?
His father was a disciplinarian and was a professional in the school system. Ricky Carmichael's mom, worked in the school system. Sometimes,
origin stories are a bit different than we think.
Yeah, sometimes people have a real secret weapon or a, like you said, an origin story or something you just don't realize. And I don't talk about Sloan very much because that's her story. But I can empathize with any family that is tempted by young success, that is tempted to take a quicker route or the all-in route. And I only caution, look, but make sure you're still looking at the big picture.
Yeah. One thing I can attest to is anything that you leave, for instance, we'll say education, anything you take away from education, you put into racing, or you put into something else. In my case, it was a lot of social things that I didn't get to do, that I felt as I've gotten older are areas that I'm like, oh, wow, like my girlfriend said this to me the other day. She's like, you're so developed in all these areas, but then you have these few areas where you're kind of just getting started, so things that you leave to the wayside that you think, screw it, I'm going all in, like I got to win Loretta's, I got to do this, right? Like that's going to come back at some point in one way or another.
1,000%. And Adam, it's like, so if you think about it, being a professional motocrosser or being a college student, you have to do the same things. I had to take all these classes. I don't remember some of the stuff I learned. No one ever stopped me in the street and said, hey, what's the, pi extended to the nth degree, whatever. But what I learned was how to build a concept, how to conduct myself, how to learn, absorb, apply. And in the end, it's really not about reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's about learning. And when you're an athlete, you got to know how to take care of your body. You got to know how to take care of your taxes. You got to know how to take care of a contract. You've got to know what your risk reward is at every given moment. You're constantly thinking. And I can't say that I was constantly thinking when I was in college. There were times when I was like, I had my shirt off in the student section.
You got to have those times.
Yeah, of course. But it's hard for you to have those times. I don't think that you could wander into the lot B at Redbud, J-Law style, and whoop it up, on a Friday night before the race.
Roll the rental car.
Yeah, but he did.
Yeah.
But my point is, it's hard to have when you're in the spotlight like you are in our little industry. It's hard to do that. But if you went to Gainesville for a University of Florida game and just faded in the student section, you'd have a ball.
Absolutely.
You can't do that.
I'm not gonna lie. I've done cool, fun things like that.
But you can't do that. Tomorrow at Southwick, win or lose.
Yeah.
It's different. But I do believe that no matter what you do, let's say you want to build a media business, it's not going to West Virginia University or San Diego State. It might be going to Verb Moto U and learning from Wes Williams. It might be going to Racer X and learning from us. It might be going to learn with Swap and Michael Antonovich at Swap Moto Live. It might be Vital MX and working with Michael Lindsay and those guys. Whatever you do, you have to learn all of it, or you're destined to fail. And even if you have that one trick, and let's say it's a backflip, it's only going to get you so far, and then sooner or later, you're not going to have that backflip, and suddenly,
then everybody's doing double backflips.
But that not everyone, and not all, and that is a herd that thins itself. But my point is, no one should think that going to school is easy. No one should think that going to be a professional athlete is easy. No one should think that
we don't do it because it's easy. We do it because we love it.
Yeah. But then you find out how hard it is. But you love it so much that you continue to do it, and you just happen to be good at it. And I was like that with school, and that's what I learned in school was, find the thing that makes you happy and do that thing, but do it well. And that's
hey, it served you well so far.
Yeah. It's I get
still learning.
I could still get a pit pass for just about any race in the world.
I think your backstory though is super interesting, because I think most people looking in would probably think that you just took over the family business, and that's clearly not the case. Like, you worked your ass off to get to where you are today.
We were there, Shane, and I appreciate that, but we were there from day one. My dad saw the movie On Any Sunday, decided to go racing, didn't realize in the movie they don't tell you that you have to have your own bike. He went out on his Triumph Bonneville and looked around and said, I want to race. They're like, well, okay, what do you got? And he's like, nothing. It's like, well, you have to go get a bike. So he traded his bike in, bought a coffin tank Mako, and went out, and it's like, I'm going to be a pro motocrosser. Well, in 1972, there was no such thing.
Yeah.
And he was already, 31 years old. And but in order to race, he realized that if he helped work on the track, maybe he could race for free. So he started watering the track and driving the tractor. And then pretty soon he realized he had this little workforce over here. And suddenly my mom is running registration and scoring, and my brother and sister and I are either flaggers or picking up garbage after the race. And we did that before we ever had mini bikes. I was working at the track before we ever had motorcycles, and I never quit, even when I was in college. And I believe me, I wish my dad were still here. I wish he would run this thing. My mom is, just went in the AMA Hall of Fame last week.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
But she's still at the races. She's at a local race right now. She was at the GNCC at Snowshoe last week, and the week before that, she was running the amateur day at High Point. I mean, she's been, doing this every day of her life since my dad went to see that movie, and so have my brother and sister and I. But when Dad passed away, Racer X as a magazine was 3 issues old, and it was already up and running, and I couldn't take over the family business, but I had to. Yeah. My sister quit her law practice to kind of help my mom because she couldn't do it by herself, and my sister really is the secret weapon that I have, although she's not so secret anymore because she's so darn good at what she does. Not only did she raise a pretty good rider in Caleb Russell, she now manages pro motocross. We work every day with Feld on super motocross. We still do the GNCC. She helps with all the contracts. She's the smartest person I know, and she also has one of the greatest moto minds I've ever known. But she didn't get it through racing. She got it through working at the races, and I think I did too. My racing career was just long enough to be something you could tell someone in a bar, but it was all the other things I did that got me here. Yeah, and got me to the point where I'm still doing this. I still get to dress like this at my age.
That's the dream.
You still work on the track? I've seen you out there with the track.
Oh, yeah. You're always out there sweating, beating steaks down or something.
And I had a little health issue a couple of years ago, not COVID related, but and I got to get myself back into shape. So once I get through Loretta Lynn's, I'm going to really my wife's putting me on a diet.
Oh, boy.
Gotta cut back on the wine at dinner and all that, but I'm like, just let me get through Loretta Lynn's, just please. That's my championship,
right?
And she's like, championship for what? And I'm like, bench racing.
I've had a lot of really fun nights there. That's some of my best childhood memories. So thank you for that. Thank you for giving me those nights and that chance.
It was all my dad's idea, and him and a guy named Paul Schlegel and my mom made it happen. And all we do is keep running the same playbook and keep trying to improve on it. And we always say that, we're so lucky that your family and everyone, you trusted us with your time, your youth, your vacations.
I gave it all to you.
Yeah. and it's up to us to make it as best we can and run. I know it was never the goal to be the president of Pro Motocross or MX Sports Pro Racing, but someone had to do it, and turns out I was born to do it. That's what my dad had in mind. I just didn't realize that it would work out the way it did. But I'm happy to be here, and I'll be out there tomorrow at 6:30.
Before me, I roll in right at riders meeting time.
Well, yeah. I mean, I went to school, but my classroom was the infield at Loretta Lynn's and the infield at High Point and the infield at Steel City and just covering the races. And I'm lucky enough to still love it. After doing it since 1972, and look forward to doing it for many, many years. But I will teach school it someday.
I'll hold you to it.
I'll do it.
I might be right there with you.
Yeah. If I ever did a podcast, and I've kicked it around, it would be on motocross history, but it'd also be on the history of areas. Like if the Motocross of Nations is in Ernée this year, I would talk about the history of Ernée, and then I'd bring in what happened right up the road in Normandy. And
try to go after a different market for us.
Yeah,
stay away from our market.
No, I'm not gonna take the Super 8 motel studio vibe. Nor can I do 24. Because Ryan and Ricky have their thing.
They're pretty good,
and you can't even the Mathis there's
a
JT,
lot. There's a lot.
Weege, those guys they're prolific.
Hey, but they run ads. Yeah. We don't run ads. We're ad free
right now.
Right now.
Any advertisers don't.
Oh man,
chill.
And I didn't even think to mention Racer had that. That's why I had to cut it off early because I had to come and sit with you guys.
There we go.
I could have been like, hey,
maybe throw it at the bottom of the column next week.
I absolutely will. And but I really like what you guys are doing. I love the Danny Blair one. It's nice to hear you. You've grown up in so many ways, and I know that the fire forges steel, and you've been through some shit. And,
oh man!
And
one day I'll write a book,
and I'll help you. I'm a great editor.
Yes,
but I remember Adam. Like I told you that the funny story when you were at Loretta Lynn's that year, but I also remember being at Budds Creek for your national debut. And I remember turning to someone saying, he's going to get the whole shot and he's going to take off. I guarantee you. And you did for about a minute. And I think you ended up
I didn't have many red blood cells at the time.
Yeah, I know because you missed Supercross and you were dealing with mono and whatever it was.
Shit show, but man, I really am glad for all of it.
Yeah, but
it worked out perfect.
The speed was there, but I was like, I'm betting on 292. I'm telling you. And I look like a genius.
Will Hahn stole my whole shot.
Yeah, but for a hot second, I was
were right.
I was like, I knew Baby Jesus was going to get that start.
Oh no, you can't mean with that one.
Oh man.
Oh, the real ones know that nickname, but I'm not claiming that.
Yeah, but it is cool to hear. When you're talking about like where your life is now and making the commitment to go to California, and you got a house and a steady, and everything's humming on all cylinders. Man, that's life. What you do is such a specialized, crazy, awesome thing, but you're going to find that moving forward, there's a lot of that stuff. It just doesn't come with a trophy.
Man, it comes at you fast, and I've had to learn and think on the fly because like I alluded to earlier, when this is all I ever wanted, man. I just wanted to win a dirt bike race. I knew nothing else for so long, and then you get a little older and you realize you have a lot of different things to tend to, and I've, at the same time I've had kind of struggles in racing. I've dealt with that, and one day, another podcast, we'll dive into all that stuff. But man, I'm grateful for guys like you that make this industry so fun and such a great place to be. And I could sit here on this weird ass couch in this Motel 8 and talk to you for 3 hours, but I think I gotta go to bed soon.
Yeah, I could as well because I might have to because my leg's asleep.
Yeah. But there's not very many options here.
I have a quick question for you before we wrap this up. Why was there a time when like Supercross and motocross didn't acknowledge each other?
That would be another podcast, but that was the old guard at what is now Feld. I think they had plans to take us over, and we were competing for sponsors, for athletes, for fans, for eyeballs on screens. And real quick, March of 2020, the Friday before Daytona.
You can take your time with this one. I'll go to bed at 9:30. It's fine.
Well, 2020, March, Dave Prater, Todd Gendro, and Mike Mewey came to Daytona. They wanted to have a meeting with Carrie Jo and I. And they said, look, we want to erase, the animosity. We realize there's a small industry. We realize how important you guys are to the grassroots. We know that you're never going to do Supercross, and you support us and you help supply us with athletes, and we want to help you. We got to get on the same page. We got to start working together, and instead of working apart, because we were never enemies. I knew as a magazine publisher and as a fan that we would always follow in the wake of Supercross. Supercross goes downtown. Supercross is what everyone aspires to be, but to get there, you got to race motocross too. And motocross is pretty damn cool as well.
It really is.
But they're different things, and you can't buy a KX450 and go ride it, in Anaheim. You gotta go do that at Fox Raceway or Glen Helen.
And it really does. When you get 14 rounds in a Supercross, you're really looking forward to that first national. So it makes it more. It does. They do feed off each other in that way.
Absolutely. And so we decided, like literally right there, that okay, let's have a farewell to arms. We actually went to dinner in Daytona, and it was like so refreshing. I mean, I was always friends with those guys, really good friends, but we would just never work together. And exactly 7 days later, COVID shuts the world down. And all of a sudden, there is no Indianapolis Supercross. They built the track. I was driving there, and it was just boom.
I remember that.
And it was like, uh-oh. And it was my sister and Tim Cotter, and, reached out to Dave Prater and said, hey, we've got to do something. We've got to figure out, like, they're going to want to, whenever we get out of this, if we get out of this, it's going to be a while before they open racetracks back up. We didn't realize that racetracks would have a very unique way of coming back, in that, what's a better way to social distance than go out to the races on Friday night, or out in the woods, or out to the motocross track. And suddenly, the size of Gatorback meant you could social distance, and you could fit the Minios in and all these things. Anyway, we built what was called the Safe to Race Task Force. We reached out to the industry. We reached out to NASCAR, Formula USA, American Flat Track, all kinds of different entities, and started just putting stuff together. Like, we need to come up with like sort of a handbook that any promoter can take to their local health officials and say, these are the things we're doing to mitigate this virus. And, and it took a while. And pretty soon it became obvious that Supercross was going to bleed into outdoors. And we called them and said, look, if we have to back up, if you guys want to try and get it in. And at first we backed up into June, and then we realized that they weren't going to be able to race until Salt Lake City, and they were going to do it with no fans and everything. And to Feld's eternal credit, and I don't think people remember this, they knew they were going to lose their asses. They were still going to pay the prize money. They were still going to have the races with no fans, but they did it so that teams wouldn't fall apart, so that Mitch Payton would still be able to justify what he was doing with his team, so that, Geico Honda at the time could still do it, so that Honda would stay in the game, Kawasaki, KTM.
Yeah, they took a big hit.
Yeah. And then we were able to do a, cobbled together 9-race deal where we actually had a race at Loretta Lynn's. Why Loretta Lynn's? Because Tennessee was one of the 5 states that had the least stringent, strict rules. And anyway, to make a long story short, again, we survived. We all survived together. No team went away. The Geico thing was a totally different deal. And we found out that we really liked working together. And it was like, well, what can we do next? And the idea became like, why don't we get Mr. Feld together with Mr. France, who runs AMA Pro Racing? And maybe, it's time to, maybe instead of having 2 sanctioning bodies, there should be 1. Why do you guys have FIM? Well, we have FIM because that was the deal, and it was a 20-year deal. Deal's up. It was like, well, why don't we just focus on here? Because how hard it was to even go to Toronto for a Supercross, let alone Tokyo. It was just not going to happen because of the way the industry is. Racing in America is based on the domestic budgets of the OEMs. Kawasaki Japan doesn't pay your contract. Kawasaki in America pays it.
Right.
And so realizing that, it was like, well, let's try something new here. And that became what is now Super Motocross. Of course, that opened the door to some other things. But right now we have a TV package that's amazing. Instead of it being 2 seasons, it's 1.
My grandparents, I haven't had to explain it to them one time. One time.
And part of that is because everyone learned how to stream during COVID.
Yeah.
And Peacock is the greatest thing in the world. And anyway, because of that, NBC was able to give us the money to do something like Super Motocross. And it was like, well, let's have this big purse. Let's really, focus on having this 1 + 1 = 3 thing. We'll give up a race, which was the second Paola, which was actually supposed to be Glen Helen. They gave up the Monster Energy Cup. So in effect, we added 1 race to the schedule, but we each gave something.
I appreciate it too, because I'm defending Monster Energy Cup
forever,
for life,
forever. If you're going to need a bigger hotel room to carry that trophy around.
Oh, I know, man. I love that thing. It's in my closet somewhere. I haven't seen that thing in 3 years.
So that's how we got back together. It was it was necessity, and then it became creativity and trust, and all of those things before that were nonsense, like Jeff Emig, being told to call pro motocross the Summer Series. That wasn't Jeff. Jeff's a 3-time champion. He hated that. He's like, they made me,
Right.
But those people are all gone, and the people there now are wonderful to work with. Mike Mewey is sitting in the AMA rig bench racing tonight. We'll probably meet for dinner, and I'll tell them that we need to get better digs than the shithole we're staying in.
Maybe after that SMX payout hits, we'll be able to get a little bit more of a steady setup. Right now, we're keeping it on the go.
Let me throw a question at you just to end this, because I got to go back to my stuff. If DeCoster calls you, Team USA, would you go?
Oh, absolutely. Come on now. You know me.
I
know the answer to that.
I just wanted to get it.
I'm going to need to start going faster.
Yeah, I wanted to get it on vinyl or whatever you call this. What's this called?
I don't know.
Audio.
I want to get this on audio.
In the cloud.
Yeah, in the cloud.
Yeah, we've got there's a lot of moving parts right now. There's a lot of good guys and a lot of good candidates.
When is it? Like
October 7th.
October
so
7th.
2 weeks after the Los Angeles Coliseum Super Motocross World Championship.
If Adam gets picked,
final.
will you take us to Normandy?
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
Right now, I'm not gonna lie. The first week of October, I'm booked for a Baker's Bay, Abaco, Bahama golf trip. But if Team USA calls me, I'll definitely give it a look over.
I don't know who they're gonna call, but man, everything's been so topsy turvy, and you've been riding well, and I feel like the best is coming.
Yeah, I like that.
You guys
I like that.
Just get a moto win and start stacking them, and you'll be fine.
I'll be there. All right, let's do it.
Yeah. So
Well, thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, Davey.
So this is where you do the closeout music and
no, we don't have
special effects.
Because what was the thing with the opening?
So
like
we didn't want to. It's on YouTube also, so we didn't want to get it like clipped for monetization.
So you guys don't have like a big giant sphere like they have in Vegas?
There's no sphere.
Not yet.
We're waiting on
it's
the
coming.
SMX payout
It's coming. It's humble beginnings. We're focused on content now, and we'll get there. But no, thank you, Davey. Yeah. Really enjoyed it. We're gonna have to do this again at some point.
Yeah.
We could sit here and talk forever. But Shane, thank you. You're awesome. And thank you guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. See you next time.